Today's lesson is Germany's most romantic road trip. Hi, everybody. My name is Roger.
And I'm Helen.
And we are traveling today. And, of course, if we've got the opportunity to travel, of course, once these COVID restrictions are lifted, then we can all hit the road and travel the world. That's what lots of us want to do. And maybe Germany is a place you'd like to go to.
It sounds absolutely wonderful. I've never been to Germany, much less taken a road trip in Germany, but I've heard that Germany has a lot of nice scenery, rolling hills, green hills, and castles. So probably the best way to see Germany is with a road trip, to drive from town to town, village to village, and just appreciate all of the beauty that surrounds you.
Indeed, and it's not difficult to do, of course. Your Taiwan driver's license can be easily converted into an international driver's license. So, of course, once you get to Germany, you can rent a car and you can drive on the Autobahn and things like that. So, indeed, we're recommending a road trip for you in today's lesson, and it's a romantic road trip. And you'll go to lots of different places. You'll stop and see castles and all sorts of wonderful scenery. So, yes, indeed, we highly recommend this trip to you. So let's do it, everybody. Let's listen to the first paragraph of today's lesson, and then we'll be right back to discuss it.
Germany's most romantic road trip. Mighty stone castles, rolling green hills, and charming medieval villages. These might sound like the makings of a fairy tale, but they are just the start of what southern Germany's romantic road has to offer. Take a drive along this 460-kilometer route for a romantic trip filled with scenery and history.
大家好，第一部分我们看到单字 medieval。medieval 这个字也可以念作 medieval。这个字是形容词，指中世纪的。例如 A medieval castle stands still on a hill at the center of the city. 有一座中世纪城堡屹立于该市中央的山丘上。或是 Andy found a medieval necklace while metal detecting. Andy 在做金属侦测时找到一条中古世纪的项链。
So we're talking about Germany in this lesson, and we're going to talk about the most romantic road trip that you can take in Germany along this particular road. And what can you see on this road? Well, it says here, mighty stone castles, rolling green hills, and charming medieval villages. These might sound like the makings of a fairy tale, but they are just the start of what southern Germany's romantic road has to offer. So if you go along this road, which is known as the Romantic Road, located in southern Germany, you will come across these things that seem like they come right out of a fairy tale. And these things include stone castles, rolling green hills, and charming medieval villages.
Right, so we begin this paragraph by introducing these things to you, and then we tell you about them. So indeed, these might sound like the makings of a fairy tale. So here we've got the term makings, or the makings of something. That just refers to the things that are included in something, the things that are used to make up something. So indeed, these sound like the things that you would find in a fairy tale. Or if you wanted to tell somebody a fairy tale, then you would have these things. You'd have castles and rolling hills and these medieval villages.
Yes. Now, take a drive along this 460-kilometer route for a romantic trip filled with scenery and history. So this route, which can also be pronounced route, is 460 kilometers long. And the word route or route is the road or the path that you use when you go from one place to another. So, for example, Route number 66 is a famous highway in the United States that stretches from east to west. It goes all the way from not exactly the East Coast, but somewhere in the east of the United States. And it extends all the way to the west coast of the United States. And a lot of people drive along this route if they want to see authentic America. They can get a taste of what America was like back in the 1950s and 1960s. That's Route 66. But here we're talking about the Romantic Road, which is a route that's 460 kilometers long that will take you across a lot of beautiful scenery and history.
Exactly. So, yeah, there are lots of different routes that you can take in various countries. Of course, here a popular route, a scenic route, is to drive down the East Coast, of course, from Ilan down to Taidong. There's lots of wonderful scenery along that route here. But if you're in Germany, then you can drive along this very long route here. It's 460 kilometers long, and it's a romantic trip filled with scenery and history. And remember, scenery just refers to what you can see outdoors as you're traveling. You can see mountains, you can see rivers, you can see forests. Those are all part of scenery. And you can see great scenery here in Taiwan as well, but, you know, there are other things to check out in different parts of the world as well. Okay, that brings us to the end of the first part of our lesson. Let's now move on to the second part and talk about this route in detail.
The route begins just outside of Frankfurt, in the tiny town of Würzburg, home to beautiful vineyards and Baroque architecture. A must-see is Würzburg Residence, one of Europe's most important Baroque palaces and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Built in the 18th century, the palace features impressive interior design, including a grand staircase and a huge fresco by the Venetian artist Tiepolo.
第二部分我们看到名词 vineyard 指葡萄园，例如 The grapes in the vineyard are almost ready to be picked. 在葡萄园的葡萄已经几乎可以采收了，或是 There are many vineyards in the Italian countryside. 意大利乡间有许多葡萄园。另外补充一个与葡萄相关的片语 Hear through the grapevine. Grapevine, G-R-A-P-E-V-I-N-E, grapevine, hear through the grapevine, 指听闻小道消息，像是 I heard through the grapevine that Michelle got a new job abroad. 我听说 Michelle 在国外找到新工作。再举一个例子I heard through the grapevine that he is getting married. Is that true? 我听说他要结婚了，这是真的吗？再来我们看到单字 staircase， 这个字是名词，指楼梯间。举例来说 The boy is sitting in the staircase. 那个男孩坐在楼梯间。或是 During recess, many people come up and down the staircase. 在下课期间，有许多人上下楼梯。
So the route begins just outside of Frankfurt, the city of Frankfurt, in the tiny town of Würzburg, home to beautiful vineyards and Baroque architecture. So in this tiny town, you will find vineyards, beautiful vineyards. A vineyard is a farm that grows grapes and produces wine. And you will also find Baroque architecture. So architecture refers to buildings, houses, and Baroque, this adjective that describes those buildings and houses, is a style of building, a style of art that was popular in the 17th and early 18th century in Europe. So this particular area of Germany is famous for Baroque architecture or architecture of that period in history.
Yeah, I think Baroque architecture has lots of details and things like that. So, yeah, just do a Google search, look for Baroque architecture, and you'll get some good examples of that. I think there are lots of examples of Baroque architecture in Germany, and you might be surprised to see vineyards there. A lot of people think that, well, in Europe, only the French or only the Italians make wine, but hey, they make some pretty good wine in Germany as well, in addition to their beer. So, yes, indeed, you're going to see some great great vineyards there, and you're going to see some wonderful Baroque architecture. That's the style of building there, Baroque architecture, and that's in the tiny town of Würzburg. Now, a must-see is Würzburg Residence, one of Europe's most important Baroque palaces and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So yes, you begin your journey there in this small town, but don't be in a big hurry because there are actually lots of things to see in that first little town. In fact, this is a must-see, the Würzburg Residence. So, of course, a must-see is something that you have to see. For example, if you go to Paris, a must-see is the Eiffel Tower or the Louvre Museum. Those are must-sees.
Right. These are must-sees, or you must see them because they're famous or they have some kind of cultural or historical significance. And in the case of Würzburg, a must-see is this residence, the Würzburg Residence. A residence is a house or some kind of place where people live. It's usually very big and it's usually inhabited by important people. So, for instance, if you go on a holiday to an ancient city or a place with a lot of history, then you might end up visiting the residences of former kings and nobles. And this is probably one of those cases in Würzburg. The Würzburg residence is a palace. It's one of the most important Baroque palaces in Europe, and it's also a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which just means that the United Nations, this particular agency of the UN, has recognized its importance as part of the World Heritage. So it has a protected status. It cannot be destroyed or it cannot be changed in any way without the permission of authorities.
Built in the 18th century, the palace features impressive interior design, including a grand staircase and a huge fresco by the Venetian artist Tiepolo. It was built in the 1700s or the 18th century, and it has some really great interior design. Interior means having to do with the inside of a structure. Of course, the opposite would be exterior. So it has impressive interior design, so you can expect to see some really ornate rooms and some really wonderful furniture and stuff like that.
Right. So as a part of the interior design of this residence, there is a grand staircase. A staircase is a set of stairs in a building that also includes the part where you hold on to, which is called the banister. So it has a grand staircase and a huge fresco. A fresco is a wall painting, a painting that is applied directly to the wall and not on canvas. And this fresco was completed by the Venetian artist Tiepolo, a famous Italian artist from Venice.
Exactly, and Venetian, of course, is the adjective for anything coming from Venice. So if you're a blind person from Venice, you would be called a Venetian blind. Not really, of course. Venetian blinds are things that cover your windows. I think you say 百叶窗 in Chinese for Venetian blinds. Okay, that brings us to the end of the second part of our lesson for today. It's time now to listen to the third and final part.
Next, visit the riverside town of Rothenburg ob der Tauber. Tourists from around the world flock there to see its well-preserved old town, which will make you feel like you've been transported back to medieval times. Farther south is a slightly quieter medieval town called Nordlingen. One of its main attractions is the circular city wall that encloses the town. Its other claim to fame is that it was built in the crater of a meteor that struck 15 million years ago.
第三部分我们看到片语 claim to fame 表示著名之处或是主要成就。例如 Robert's claim to fame is that he can whistle Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. Robert 出名的原因是他能以口哨吹出贝多芬的第9号交响曲。或是Barack Obama's claim to fame is that he is the first black president of the United States. 奥巴马以成为美国第一位黑人总统而成名。最后我们看到名词 meteor 指流星。例如 People make a wish when seeing a meteor. 人们在看到流星时会许愿。或是 It was a beautiful night. We laid on the hill and watched the meteor shower. 那是个很美丽的夜晚。我们躺在山坡上看流星雨。
So after you have visited Würzburg, next visit the riverside town of Rothenburg ob der Tauber. So this next town is situated next to a riverside, which is why it's called a riverside town. Tourists from around the world flock there to see its well-preserved old town, which will make you feel like you've been transported back to medieval times.
Yes, we like those old cities in Europe. That's one of the main reasons people travel to Europe, is to see those old towns and those old buildings and stuff like that. And in this particular case, the old town is well preserved. It is very well protected. It's not falling down. It's not in disrepair. It's taken well care of. And of course, the people of this town realize that it has tourist value. Lots of tourists are going to go there and spend money. So of course, they're going to make sure that the town is well preserved. And that will make you feel like you've been transported back to medieval times. Medieval just means the Middle Ages. And I say medieval here, but I guess there are other ways to pronounce this word. One is medieval with an extra syllable in there, but I just kind of skip over that syllable and say medieval, and a lot of people say it that way.
Yes, and there is another medieval town further off. Farther south is a slightly quieter medieval town called Nordlingen. So this town, Nordlingen, is medieval, but it's slightly quieter than Rothenburg ob der Tauber. Slightly quieter, not a lot quieter. So slightly just means not very much. Only a little, maybe because it's smaller or doesn't receive as many tourists, but still it's a medieval town that's worth visiting. One of its main attractions is the circular city wall that encloses the town.
Right, so here we've got the verb to enclose, which means something is around that thing, and then these things are inside that thing, okay? So, of course, a letter would be enclosed in an envelope. If you write a letter to somebody using paper and pen, you would include that letter inside the envelope. You would enclose it inside the envelope. And remember, if you're writing an email to somebody, you might include an enclosure, and that would be the noun form. But here, enclose is a verb.
Yes, so this little town, Nordlingen, is famous because it has a circular wall that encloses the town. Its other claim to fame is that it was built in the crater of a meteor that struck 15 million years ago. So aside from being famous for this circular city wall, it has another claim to fame. A claim to fame is a thing that makes a place or a person famous or interesting. So in the case of Nordlingen, its other claim to fame, or the other thing that makes it famous, is the fact that this town was built in the crater of a meteor. A crater is a large round hole on the surface of a planet, or it can be in a large piece of land that was created by a meteor. A meteor is a large piece of rock from space that passes into the Earth's atmosphere, and when it hits the ground, it will create a crater because of the impact, because of how heavy it is. Now, this meteor struck Nordlingen around 15 million years ago and created this crater, and the town of Nordlingen was built on this crater, and that continues to be its other claim to fame.
Of course, if you have a telescope or some binoculars, you can look at the moon and see lots and lots of craters. And there are craters on the Earth as well, but because of surface activity of the Earth, I think because of plate tectonics and things like that, those craters tend to get filled in, like there's supposedly a big crater in Mexico where a meteor hit 65 million years ago and killed off all the dinosaurs. But in this particular case, a meteor hit this region about 15 million years ago, and so the city is built inside that crater. So if you're into that sort of thing, you might actually see the crater walls when you're visiting this town. So yeah, it has some attractions there for people who like old history, but also for people who might like geology and things like that. And okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. It's time now to listen to Henny, our beloved Chinese teacher.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。 课文一开始描述雄伟的石头城堡、连绵起伏的绿色山丘和迷人的中世纪村庄，然后课文就说 These might sound like the makings of a fairy tale。这些或许听起来都像是童话故事的必要条件。好，文中的 makings 它是表达制作某事物所需要的人或事物，或者是成为某事物所需要的特质必要条件。当这个意思解释的时候呢，固定用复数型。我们补充一个相关用法是 have the makings of 或者是 have all the makings of 是表达具备成就什么的要素，具备成就什么的所有要素。好，举例来说 Adam has all the makings of a great leader 就是说 Adam 他具备了杰出领导者的所有特质。那再补充一个 making 有关的用语哦，我们用 in the making 是表达形成中，这个 making 就有制造形成的意思。那 in the making 就是表达尚未完成正在制作中的什么什么，或者是未来的什么什么。像如果我们描述某个人是 a superstar in the making 就是说他是未来的超级巨星。你也许会听到这样的话说 We were watching history in the making 表示说我们正在看历史的形成，我们正在见证历史的缔造。好，另外文中用到的是 sound like 加名词去表达听起来像是怎么样。那我们这边来学习跟感官有关的连缀动词，像 sound 听起来， smell 闻起来， taste 尝起来， look 看起来， feel 感觉起来等等，它们后面都可以接形容词，或者是也可以接 like 加名词，那你就可以表达出什么听起来像什么啊，闻起来像什么，看起来像什么等等。举例来说 You look different. Did you get a haircut? 你看起来不太一样是不是有剪头发呢？那我们再看一个例句 The food tastes kind of like tofu. 这食物啊尝起来有点像豆腐好，那么课文第二部分介绍了法兰克福郊外的小镇福兹堡，文中它是用到 home to beautiful vineyards and Baroque architecture 来描述这里有美丽的葡萄庄园和巴洛克建筑。那么 home 当名词可以指发源地所在地，那常见的用法有两种，第一种是 be home to 加名词，表达说是什么的所在地栖息地，某地拥有了什么。那这样的句型是去表达某人或某事物它是归属于某地，其中的 home 是不可数名词哦。例如 Iceland is home to many amazing waterfalls. 冰岛有许多令人赞叹的瀑布。好，那第二个用法是 be the home of 加名词，可以表达为什么的所在地、发源地、栖息地，这时候 home 是当可数名词。例如 Australia is the home of the kangaroo. 澳洲是袋鼠的栖息地。好，以上是今天重点整理，我们来回顾今天单字吧。
Route. Which route should we take if we want to get there as quickly as possible? Residence. Only someone incredibly wealthy could afford such a residence. Interior. The interior walls have been painted an awful shade of pink. Slightly. The cake was slightly sweeter than I thought it would be. Enclose. The rose garden is enclosed by a tall white fence.
Well, everyone, today's article has come to an end, and I sure hope you enjoyed reading along with us. I am Roger.
I'm Helen.
See you next time.